Welcome back to RE Radar. My name is Nathan Mathisen. I am your host once again. This is episode 6 of RE Radar, and today I am joined with a special guest, Ian Alexander. So welcome, Ian.
Thank you.
And Ian he's in his 7th year of real estate. He's more recent to Seattle as he's spent his past 7 years, pretty much 6 years in Louisville, Kentucky doing real estate. So we're going to get a real interesting conversation there, talking about that market, comparing it to Seattle. And then another interesting thing with Ian is he spent a lot of his background in construction, general contractor work, building homes. So we're going to get really both sides of it, from building a home to then selling the home, and really help inform you guys and give you guys some great information on all of that stuff. So just jumping right in, we'll just kind of jump right in right away. And could you speak on your experience as a general contractor and like building homes and how that's helped you as a real estate agent, what that's given you and what that's done for your career, I guess you could say almost?
Yeah, that's where my background started. My dad's a carpenter, so I grew up building houses. I started about 13 years old, as a helper on job sites. Really jumped into it full time right after high school. Through college, I was a framer. Did a couple big developments, everything from infrastructure, doing all the sanitary and storm sewers, all the water line, installing the roads. And then we went on to the framing of the homes. So I kind of oversaw all of that. Been around a lot of remodeling as well. Louisville, Kentucky's got a lot of older homes in it. So there's a lot of remodeling work to be done, a lot of Victorian age homes. So there's a lot of really old wiring, a lot of old windows that don't work, that kind of stuff. Foundation problems in the older homes, before there were any kind of strict building codes, a lot of stuff was done that really makes you step back and say, how's this house still standing? That translated over as I got older, and the building was a little harder on the body. So it was kind of a natural progression into from building homes to selling homes. That's what my wife does as well. She's been licensed well over 10 years. So it's kind of a natural progression we were doing flips and stuff like that. So I was like, might as well help sell them as well.
Mm-hmm. Speaking on flips, I guess we'll go out of order a bit. What do you see with how a fixer-upper home versus a home that's going to be a teardown? What's a home where you could fix it up, flip it quickly, and make a profit with that versus a home that you're going to have to probably tear it down completely and restart? What do you see as kind of some key factors, some key points that you like to look at, and key telltale signs, I guess you could say?
Well, it's an accumulative thing, because, if you go in and it just needs a roof, a roof's an expensive thing, but if that's all it needs, that's not that big of a deal. But if you go in and it needs a roof and it needs, plumbing, there's plumbing issues like collapsed sewers, and, plumbing gets really expensive really fast. If you're fixing something just inside the home, it's not that big of a deal. But when you start digging up the yard and going out to where it meets the street, it gets really expensive really fast. A lot of unforeseen stuff there. You can say, okay, the sewer is not draining. Is it as easy as just running a snake down it and clearing it, a blockage? Or is it, like I said, a collapsed sewer line? And then you get, you dig up the whole yard, then you're replacing from, might be right by the house you're replacing. It could be the whole sewer all the way out to the street. Foundation issues, people freak out about foundation issues, but, a lot of them aren't nearly as expensive as you think they can be. Basic stuff can be fixed pretty easy. Like houses settle over time, just it's natural. So you go into a 20-year-old home and you see a few cracks here and there, like through a mortar joint of the brick. It's not that big of a deal. It's just natural settlement. It's just basic tuck pointing. Or you get into red flags is like if it cracks directly through a brick and not just in the mortar line, then you're a little more concerned that it's a structural issue. Especially like if it's a block foundation, if there's cracked blocks and not just cracked mortar, then it's definitely a foundation issue, whether it be the footer's bad or wasn't poured correctly. It takes a little more. That's where you get your structural engineers, your home inspectors. They can say, okay, this doesn't look right, but you really need like a structural engineer to look at it to tell you, hey, this is okay or it's not. Because I've had home inspectors freak out about something, and I had structural engineers that I knew. I called and they come and it's like, this is no big deal. It's a simple fix.
Yeah, I think that's like a big thing with the people aren't experts in it. And so you want to go out and talk with these experts, because somewhere on the street, if you say, oh, it's just got a little crack in the foundation, a small little thing, they'll be like, oh, that's a huge issue. When in fact, if you talk to an expert, they could be, oh, that's no biggie at all. It's just an easy little fix up job.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of people, freak out over the littlest things, a little
Yeah.
crack in the drywall, and there's like, it's a basic settlement. The house settles over time.
Exactly. It's just a natural thing. I mean, houses, especially in some areas, I mean, they can be 100+ years old. Do you
Yeah,
expect something to be still in perfect condition after 100 years with
yeah,
all that wear and tear? No, you
yeah.
don't. So it's
And
just kind of,
going back to, how do you know if it's a tear down or not? The foundation is an issue. A lot of your mechanical stuff like heating and air, if you go in and it's got a furnace in it that's, 60 years old, that's not just going to be ripping out a furnace and putting a new furnace in. You're going to be rerunning duct work, to make it, because the way the houses were designed previously and the way to what we know about heating and cooling now, it's a totally different ball game. So you go into an old home that has an old furnace. It's not just repairing the unit or replacing the unit. It's you're going to replace most of your ductwork. Where the supply lines at, where the return lines are at, to make it most efficient. Not everybody does that. A lot of your flippers are going to come in and say, "Oh, just rip it out and put a new heating unit in," and then it's functional, yes, but it's not optimal efficiency. And that's if you're doing it, you may as well do it right the first time.
yeah, that's what we've seen. We're in the same office and we've been going out on home tours, and sometimes we'll see a flip house and we're like, this was clearly kind of a rush job. You can see the telltale signs of not putting into the effort. Like you've spoken on how laying down the LVP flooring with the edges. Could you
Yes.
speak on that a bit with how sometimes a contractor won't do it properly?
Well, a lot of times, those are floating floors, so they're supposed to move. They're not supposed to be tacked down. They're not supposed to be held in place, with anything rigid. So they're typically, they come up short of the baseboard, and then you lay quarter round over it to cover that gap. And a lot of builders, they'll either run it directly, tight up against the baseboard or under the baseboard, and then put the baseboard down tight on it. And it's, you really want that room for it to expand and contract. And it's,
Yeah.
it's just little things like that. When you see little missteps like that, it makes you really raise red flags. Where else that we
Yeah.
can't see that it might be an issue?
Exactly, because there's so much of a home that you don't really see,
Yeah,
especially for someone who's walking through a home looking to buy a home. They're not going to be seeing all the inner workings of it. What's the electrical work looking like and all that type of stuff.
yeah,
So you have to really,
they see the finishes, and the finishes look good, so they're like, "Oh, everything
yeah,
looks great."
exactly. Another
Yeah,
thing that we've kind of touched on with these tours is with the roofs and how sometimes someone who replaces a roof, they forever whatever reason may not put enough ventilation up it, or they don't realize those holes that are on the bottom side are needed, so they'll just
yeah,
cover them up. And then if a roof doesn't have ventilation, that can cause some big issues.
yeah. Well, and construction knowledge and techniques have changed a lot over the years. And people come in and they say, "I want the roof replaced," and the roofer looks at it and they see it, and they just literally do exactly what was there. They just replace what was there, and don't take into account that we need more ventilation. They're recommending more ventilation now than they did years ago. They're recommending, freeze guards in your valleys. That used to not be something they did. They put metal in the valleys of a roof, and that's nobody does that anymore. And
Yeah.
if you have a roofer that just looks at what's there and they just replace exactly what's there, it may not be up to modern standards.
Exactly. Times are changing. Things are always finding new and improved ways to do things. And sometimes, if you just repeat the old ways, that's not going to be good enough for
Yeah.
today's era in homes. So, could you kind of speak on a bit of your experience with remodels and home improvements and how you see what are actually good things people can do to their homes before selling it that can actually, they could see the return on that investment?
Okay. Yeah. There's a ton of things you can do. The biggest thing and the most inexpensive thing is before you list, is just like a deep clean. Just get the house clean and presentable. Nobody wants to admit, no seller wants to admit that they're not the cleanest person. So the biggest thing is like a good deep clean, carpets, tile, grout, stuff you don't clean every day. It's like a once in a blue moon kind of thing. But before you list, you want to get that stuff out of the way. You don't want buyers to come through and say, "Ooh, this grout's grimy. I wonder where else they, skipped on maintenance." Just basic, simple stuff like that. Countertops, a lot of your stone countertops need a polishing. You do that kind of stuff. Cleaning your roof, it gets a little more expensive, cleaning the roof as opposed to carpet cleaning. But that's going to be the first impression people get. They're going to walk up, they're going to see the roof, they're going to say, "It's covered in moss. So let's What else have they not maintained? Going along that, siding, exterior stuff, basic pressure washing of siding. I've had, multiple listings. People come and they look at it. Well, the siding's dirty. It's basic maintenance stuff that's been neglected, and that raises a red flag with buyers. And that's all stuff that's not super expensive. It's just basic homeowner maintenance. Exterior work, cleaning out flower beds, any kind of overgrown stuff against the house. Any kind of vegetation against the house is a place for bugs to get on the house or water intrusion or to damage the exterior. So it's just basic stuff like that. That's not super expensive. You get a little more expensive doing any kind of landscaping upgrades, hardscape, that kind of stuff. Just everything that adds to curb appeal. When they first step out of the car and they see the house, they're going to say, ooh, this is a great house, or ooh, this has been neglected. And you want that first impression before they walk through that front door. Getting a little more expensive, painting, to paint the interior of the home. It really brightens it up. Not everybody, I've had several deals fall apart or not come to fruition when the colors were off-putting. If you go in and you got a red room, not everybody wants a red room, and they're hard to cover up. It's a lot of work to cover that paint up. Doesn't photograph well for for listing photos. Just basic stuff like that. And then, you get more expensive. You could do, like I said, the landscaping, you could get more in depth, do the hardscape, add a patio, that kind of stuff, really add to the curb appeal and buyer appeal. As far as like interior updating, remodeling stuff, you get the biggest bang for your buck with typically a kitchen remodel. So like if you're wanting to do a big project, kitchen remodel, you get a big chunk of your investment back, because most people walk in, they say, oh, it's a nice updated kitchen. It's something I don't have to do, because to remodel a kitchen while you're living in a home is a tough one.
And the kitchen's kind of a huge part for someone. A nice kitchen is something people are often looking for when they're going to try to buy a new home. They want a kitchen because you cook meals in a kitchen, you eat 3 meals a day. You're going to be in that kitchen all the time.
Yep. And even if people have the money, and the budget to remodel a kitchen, once you've moved into a home, it's really hard to remodel something like you said you're using 3 times a day. What do you do when you don't have a range to cook your dinner on for a week, or no countertops for 3 or 4 weeks? Your cabinets get set and there's no counters. Once your cabinets are set, they got to come and measure for the counters, and then they got to fabricate the counters. So now you've got cabinets but no countertops. So it's kind of, it throws you into, your life into a tailspin. Bathrooms are a little easier to remodel if you're living in it, if you have multiple bathrooms. But if it's a single bath, how do you remodel a bathroom while you're living there? And you have no bathroom. I mean, you literally no shower, no toilet. What do? You go live in a hotel for a week while it's getting remodeled. So that's big things to do before you put it on the market, because that's really big for buyers. A buyer's going to say, hey, I literally just bring my toothbrush and come and live. Because they're just, like I said, they're big undertakings once someone's in the home. You don't want to, moving is an event all in itself. And you don't want to move your whole life to a new home and then say, oh, we're in our new home, now let's upend our life with a remodeling project. That's a lot all at once. And in certain houses, the kitchen could be updated, but it's livable, and it could be put off. But if sellers are wanting to do, any kind of big undertaking before they list the home, I think the kitchen or a bathroom gets the biggest return on your investment. You see almost all of that money back in their sale price.
Now, so a new segment that I'm going to be doing here on RE Radar when I have a fellow realtor on with me is I'm going to have them bring up one of their past deals that they've worked on and just speak on something interesting, something of note that occurred during that deal to help inform you guys on what all goes down in a real estate deal and how there can be so many different moving parts and how things can go wrong, and how us realtors, we have to think on our toes and have to get things done, and sometimes have to do some things to save these deals last minute. So what's the deal? What's the example that you've brought with us today, Ian?
I've got a ton of them. It's just the biggest thing I see come up is closing timelines. If you've got a set, you have a contract that's supposed to close on, May the 5th, and not everybody's on agreement with that. It gets pushed to the last possible day with the contract, and that's where you get contentious at, especially, if people are wanting to close early, especially if it's an occupied home. So if the buyer's wanting to close early, the seller, they have nowhere to go until they close on their new home. So the buyer's like, well, I want to close a week early. Well, the seller's like, well, that's fine, but I'm staying here until the end of the contract, because I have nowhere to live. I have to wait to close on my new home or rental, whatever it is, whatever their housing situation is. You've got to take into both people's timelines, the buyer and the seller. You can't just say, well, the buyer's ready, or, the seller needs another week. Well, the buyer's already sold their house and they have to move in. So, you know what I'm saying? It's a lot of moving parts. That's what I've seen come up a lot. Then you see stuff like personal property. People come into a home and they tour the home and they love everything in the home. And then when they go to close, there's something that's not there that they thought might be there. Like I had a client, she was real artsy, and she made these towel racks out of bourbon barrel staves. Okay, which is just a piece of the bourbon barrel, and it's just neat. It had the, whatever the bourbon brand was on it. It was a towel rack, and it was hanging in this listing when it went under contract. When we went to closing, she wanted to take that down because that was a thing she had made. Well, that was like that blew up in the closing table, and it was just that towel rack. It was just a custom small, like a hand towel for a bathroom, and
Yeah.
something that small can hold up a deal. And then, just fixtures in general, beautiful chandeliers that, was somebody's grandmother's chandelier, and they messed up and they put it in a listing photo, and then they changed out with a cheap Lowe's chandelier after the listing photos. And that's always an issue. That's why I tell people, anything you don't want to go with the house, get it out before we shoot the pictures. That's my thoughts, because that can hold up a deal, because it's technically that was, the chandelier's a fixture. It's there and it's attached. It was in the listing photo, and, by the law, that's part of the deal. So that could be, very contentious. You don't want to take a $2,000 chandelier that's in the listing photo and replace it with a $200 chandelier from Lowe's. Because people are like, hold the phone, wait a minute.
Yeah, people. I could definitely see some people being like, "Wait a minute, this was not
Yeah,
what I was looking to buy," because it legitimately wasn't. It was kind of
yeah,
almost false advertising type with that.
exactly. And other things are, like basketball goals in the yard. Some of those can be really expensive. You've got the cheap roll around ones that you fill up with water, but some of the other ones, the big Gorilla Glass ones, they're $2,000-3,000 for a basketball goal. And if that's there when a buyer looks at the home, they expect it to be there when they close, because that's a fixture. It's bolted to the ground. It's, set in concrete. The seller has to understand that. If you don't want that to go with the home, you get it taken down before you list. You know?
Exactly. So now you're from Louisville, Kentucky, and you're up here in
Yes.
Seattle now. You've seen the markets different. What are kind of some of the first things you've noticed that are different, or some similarities you've noticed with the Seattle and Louisville, Kentucky real estate market? I'm sure obviously the price is a big
Yeah.
thing.
Oh yeah. There's a lot. The average sale price in Seattle is about 3 times what it is in Louisville. So, that's a big adjustment. But the thing, not only are prices higher here, you get the price appreciation here. You get a really good price appreciation on your assets here as far as real estate goes. Whereas Kentucky, you're maybe 2 or 3% a year if you're lucky. It's very low appreciation as far as real estate. But on the flip side, you get much better rental returns. Whereas Seattle, you don't get great rental returns. You don't get a real high cap rate. Whereas Kentucky, it's not uncommon to get a 15 to 20% cap rate on a rental. And it's, that's phenomenal. It's That has to do with the low cost of entry, and then coupled with high rents, because it's a corporate town. It's UPS has a world hub there. Humana's headquarters is there. Yum Brands headquarters is there. So you've got a lot of, decent paying jobs that can afford the higher rents. So anybody that's not looking to buy, you can get a good rental return. That's the big difference. As far as like building, they don't have the earthquake issues there. So, that was something different in Seattle. I come in and I see all the water heaters are strapped to the wall, and you don't ever see that there, because it's not going to, an earthquake's not going to come and knock your water heater over. It's just certain, it's just little things you don't ever even think about, that don't ever cross your mind. And you get here and you're like, oh, wow. The critical slope that we've talked about recently, the super steep slopes that could have landslides and stuff, that's little to no existence in Kentucky. They're old hills there. They're part of what's left of the Appalachian Mountains. And those are old hills, old mountains. So they're worn down. They're not steep and sharp like the Rockies or the Cascades that are new and growing. They're old, so it's more rolling, round hills. So you don't have any kind of steep slopes like that. On the flip side, they're on a giant cave system. It's the biggest cave system in the world, Mammoth Cave. So you get sinkholes. There's sinkholes opened up in people's yards or parking lots. Things you just don't think about. There's a parking lot, and then it starts sinking in, and it just gets worse, and they backfill it, and then it gets worse, and it's just giant hole. Along with caves comes radon, which is nobody here seemed to understand when I was talking about it, but it's a colorless, odorless gas that's radioactive. And, it can seep out of the ground into homes. So when you get a home inspection in Kentucky, you have just like you have here, you get like a pest inspection add-on or, a sewer scope. Well, it's a radon inspection add-on. And they literally put this thing in the house. It's a sniffer, and it sets in the house and smells the air for 48 hours and tracks the radon levels. And if it's above a certain level, you have to put a radon mitigation system in. And it's basically just an exhaust system, typically in a basement, because radon issues are more prevalent in basements because you're digging into the ground, and that's where the radon comes from. It's not uncommon in crawl spaces though. But for a mitigation system, you put a ventilation system in. It's literally just a fan and a pipe that pumps it out the side of the house, and it has a meter on it. When it gets above a certain level, the fan kicks on and exhausts it.
Are there high costs for this type of thing, or what are the
No,
costs kind of
the
for that?
add-on for the inspection's a couple $100, and then a mitigation system. It depends on the size of the home. If you got a huge basement, you may have to have two exhaust systems. So you're typically, starting at like 1,500 for the mitigation system. A lot of your new construction is built with it already installed. It may not have the exhaust fan on it, but all the piping and stuff is in. So if you get an inspection once the home is built and it's high radon, you literally just come in, put the exhaust fan on, plug it in, and you're good to go. And it's totally random. I've had houses that needed mitigation, and the next door neighbor had no radon. It's a radioactive gas, so I'm assuming it's something in the ground that's decaying that's creating the gas. So your neighbor didn't have as much decaying in the ground as you do. He has no radon. You need a mitigation system. And that's just something big that I noticed out here. And I asked an inspector, they kind of looked at me like I was speaking a different language. And there it's like everybody knows about it and everybody's super concerned about it. There's no concrete evidence that it's unhealthy, but they're worried that it could be unhealthy. So it's a preventative measure.
That's what I really love about doing this and doing this podcast, and how on episodes when it's just me, I'll just look at a random city in the United States and look at that real estate market, because it's always so interesting to see how different real estate markets are
Yeah.
across the United States. Like every state has different markets within itself even. And it's real estate's just such a fluid thing. So it's always interesting to learn about a different place that I'm not familiar with and help bring that to the audience here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely
Yeah.
different. Every market's its own.
Yep, every market is its own for sure. And we'll wrap up here. So thank you very much for joining me today, Ian.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'm glad to share some
Yep.
knowledge.
Yep, of course. You've definitely shared some good knowledge. I hope the RE Radar listeners appreciated that. So thank you very much. And thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I will see you again in 2 weeks. See ya.